Now we're going to get into create work breakdown structure. I think all of you use work breakdown structure. Yeah. Maggie, do you use work breakdown structure, or do you use like a backlog?
No, we don't really have a lot of official processes, but I tend to do some sort of work breakdown document on my own.
Okay.
Yeah, this one's kind of a weird one for me too. We don't really use a WBS. Right now I've got a lot of projects. I'm using Jira, so we're using a backlog. Kind of using the epics and the stories and the tasks. But yeah, the WBS is kind of one of those that I've not used it since I've been where I'm at from the last 2 years.
You know, Mike, in my opinion too, it's an industry thing that I've seen. Just because I've been fortunate, maybe unfortunate, to work in so many different industries, I've seen that WBS in any public works and in any sort of I see a lot of construction, obviously. I should say it this way. I don't see WBSs in technology projects that often. I typically see product backlogs, and because they use Jira or version 1 or Rally. So, but we're going to talk about both here. So the whole goal of this is to take that scope statement and break it down into a picture, and that picture should have sort of deliverables at the bottom. So we're going to take that scope statement, break it down or decompose it. That's the term for PMI, into actual deliverables. All right. So utilize and expand on the scope statement, and then we're going to create a scope baseline. The output of this process is going to be a scope baseline, and it consists of the scope statement that we created in the last process. And then we're also going to add the WBS and the WBS Dictionary. We're going to create that now. And then the scope baseline gets approved, and any changes to that, you got to use integrated change control. Right? So memorize this. 3 documents make up the scope baseline. Right? So I'll try to ask you that 30 times before we're done with the class, but you need to know that for the exam. That's going to be a question. Scope statement, WBS Dictionary, scope statement.
Here's a great question that I do remember from the exam. So they'll ask you, where would you find the scope baseline?
Hold on, stop. I'm stopping because you probably forgot to read the code of ethics where you're not allowed to talk about.
All right. I'm just telling you, there's a good one on there.
Remember that? And I'm only saying this because I'm saying this because it's right. It's the PMI way. Let's just say that, right? Okay. So just let me take a moment to mention that I talked about the code of ethics in the beginning about that win and Rome mentality, but PMI does have this sort of a strict thing about this. So I'll tell you this: you can't say, "Hey, there's questions like." Me as an REP or registered education provider, I can talk to you guys about questions, but don't ever write down or type out any questions on the exam that you've seen.
So can I rephrase that as, there's a question like, you may see something like this?
Sure.
Okay, so you may see something like this. Where would you tell someone to go find the scope baseline? Would you find it in the scope statement, WBS Dictionary, or the scope management plan? Where would you find the baseline at?
What's the 4th choice? It has to be project management.
Sorry, yeah, it's something like project management plan. Yep.
Yeah. And the answer should be the project management plan.
Well, that would be the scope management plan.
No. Remember, nothing specific to your project will ever sit in any of those subsidiary plans. So the scope management plan is just going to say, this is how we'll develop the scope statement, how we'll get it signed off on, right? And then the scope baseline is its own thing that will be it's part of the project management plan, but it's not a subsidiary plan.
Okay, good one.
Okay. Yeah, that's one good thing for you guys to all remember in here. Nothing specific to the project itself will be in a subsidiary plan. The subsidiary plan will only contain the how, the management approach. Okay. Here's the ITTLs we're going to talk about. We've seen the project management plan, the documents, EFs, OPAs. We're going to talk about decomposition. That's going to be the new tool and technique we'll talk about here. And the output, as we just discussed, is the scope baseline. we may get some document updates as well. All right, so the baseline establishes how work is completed because it's these 3 documents. So think about this. I've created this very detailed document based on requirements that I went back and collected from all of the stakeholders whose interests may be negatively or positively impacted as I try to achieve the goal set forth in the charter. So go from charter to stakeholders, collect their requirements. Now I've created this document that's, when I read it, I can see every requirement that we're going to meet. I can see all the requirements that we're not going to meet, right? What's in scope, what's out of scope. I can see how we're going to do the work, and I can see how we're going to get it signed off on, acceptance criteria. So the scope statement, very detailed. You should be able to read it, and it should, close your eyes and visually get a picture. But now that we've done that, we're going to take that document of everything that we're doing. We're not worried about what we're not doing. Right? We're going to take everything that we're doing, and we're now going to break it down into this picture of deliverables. And then we're going to create this dictionary, this WBS dictionary. Think of this as like the legend of that picture. If the picture is the map to success in the project, well, then the WBS dictionary is the legend of all the stuff on the map. So if you give me this very detailed document that I can read, and then you give me a picture about all the deliverables in that detailed document, and then you give me a legend to that picture, I should have a very good idea what this project is. I should have a baseline. So that's the idea of the scope baseline, those 3 documents. So decomposition, underline that word, that's the tool and technique from PMI. Decomposition of the total scope to be carried out by the team to accomplish the project objectives. And then, and you create the deliverables there. So represents all the product and project work. So if you have levels of training and documentation and testing, that's going to go on your WBS as well. It's usually top to bottom, although it's organized however the PM wants. This can be, horizontal, left to right, right to left, bottom up, top down. I know in the slide here, we said it's organized in the visual way, top to bottom, usually like 99% of the time. And it's translated from higher level scopes into smaller manageable work. That's what it usually looks like. But understand that from PMI's perspective and for the exam, it's up to the PM to determine which way the WBS will be developed. Okay. And each level should represent an increasing level of detail as you get down. The lowest level is going to be known as your work packages. Right. So let me see something here. All right. So lowest level is known as your work packages. And your work packages will need to have some sort of unique number. So the numbers that you see in those WBSs, they call that the code of accounts. Right? And your work packages are summed into control accounts. So let's move to the next slide. Right. The WBS dictionary provides the detailed information on the delivery activity and schedule of the WBS components. So if I go through here, you look at the code of accounts on your WBS, that's the numbering scheme. It may describe the work. It may have the person who should be doing the work, if it's a milestone, like what type of resources needed, how much it might cost, how do we show consistency, and how will we get it signed off on. You may not have gotten any of this information yet based on where we're at in the planning cycle if you were literally doing this in order with your team. And so then you would come back and update this. But if you have it, then all this stuff should be included in your WBS dictionary. All right, so most of the detailed information in the WBS dictionary is created by other processes and added later. And we may get some document updates when we do this. As you finalize your baseline, you may update assumptions, you may update requirements, you may update risk, you may update anything, right? It's a potential. Now the inputs here that we need the plan, of course, specifically the scope management plan, because that outlined how we were going to do it. So again, get it out your head, get it on paper. That's what PMI is saying. We're going to take some documents into account that we're going to need, whether it's obviously the scope statement we need, but the requirements documentation, how much each requirement meets the project's business needs. You'll need to know that. And it'll look something like this. here's your work packages at the lowest level. Here's all of your work packages here in red. Okay. And you see this 5.0 at the top. If we had, let's say, let me choose the right color here, something that's bright. Here's a green. If we had, let's say, a 5, this would be like a 5.1. This would be a 0.2, a 0.3, 0.4, so on and so forth. And then this would be like a 5.4, 0.1, and then 0.2, and then 0.3, something like that. So your typical WBS would look something like that. That's your code of accounts. Okay.
So then in the work packages, that's where your dictionary lies?
Yes, the WBS dictionary doesn't lie there. It's like a separate, if this is a chart or a diagram, the
Right.
WBS dictionary would be a separate document that would say, okay, it would just have, it, you know, instead of a visual, it would be a Word document that would have a Roman numerical hierarchy, and it would say like software product release 5, and then you would indent out, 5.1 project management, and then indent out again, planning, meetings, that. It would look something like that. It would have all that information about what those numbers are, which of these are control accounts, right? If you're tracking money, it would have all of that.
So let me ask something here. I hope I'm not going off the track, but so you asked me if I ever dealt with a WBS or nothing like that. Well, no, but when I do build schedules, right? We use Microsoft Project. So in Microsoft Project, you can break it down into levels, and then you can you can look at the activity, you can break it in, and you can actually look into the activity, and you can see its dependencies, it's all the things that go with it, the resources, etc. Is that kind of how so I'm just asking, does this usually integrate with some type of project management information system as you're updating that the WBS will get updated, in terms of the whole picture?
Well, I like the example you use, because I'll typically use that example when I teach this, which is the fact that when you're in project and you go and you look at a specific task and you go and you look at the attributes, that's sort of what a WBS dictionary is.
Okay.
So
yeah.
It wouldn't necessarily be well, how do I say this? I should just say, yeah, in project, that's what your WBS dictionary would be. In Primavera P6, it might look different. In Jira for you, this is the notes. This is the notes. This is the resources that are there. If you guys have done, added like harvest time tracking or anything like that, that's your WBS, right? All the tasks, and then you can see like which user story it rolls up to and which epic, if it's in a release, is it in a sprint? That's your WBS dictionary in your set.
Okay. Yeah, got it. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so you might have many different approaches, and we've just described a few. But all you have to do is verify the 100% rule. It's gonna capture all the work, and it'll distribute up or down, if you will. So top down, bottom up, or organization specific. It's up to you how you want to organize your WBS, right? It could even be by group who's doing the work, and I guess that's what bottom up would be here, right? And then your components represent the verifiable products, right? Those work packages, right? Let you know that we're able to look at this thing and test it, and we know that it's complete, right? So you can decompose it to a level that allows the work to be effective manageably and confirm that those components are necessary. So here's the WBS rule. All the work at the lowest level should roll up so that's nothing's left out and no extra work is performed. All right, that's your 100% rule. Any questions about this?
Yeah, can you give an example of that? I'm not quite grasping that last statement, and I'm having trouble visualizing that.
So we have project management. They have the requirements for the product. Let me get this off of there. Okay, they have the detailed design. I see the construct. I see integration and test. Now I see training, program, materials. I see user documentation. I see software, right? But if I'm looking at this in my 100% rule, I will go back and I would look at the scope statement. And if anywhere in there it talks about, the fact that all the users must be able to use this product, and the first thing I would say is, well, I don't see training on here. I see training, program, materials. I don't see training. Where's that at, right? So that's kind of like the 100% rule idea.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And I guess a more succinct way of saying that is being able to go back to the scope statement, and as you're looking at it, verify that every part of it has somehow been, included in the WBS.
So then I guess just to go back to that one last point on that, like you said, you identified there's no training in there, then theoretically one would have to go back in there and put something that would cover training.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
And the other part of it is just as you're, see, and this ties into integrated change control. As you're continuing your plan, and let's say you get to risk and you start finding some risk, and you're like, all right, we're going to avoid these risks and we're going to accept these, and these ones we're going to mitigate. So if you're mitigating, then you got to take some activity. Those activities now need to somehow come back to your WBS. So that's part of the 100% rules. That integrated change control will look at that and then say, okay, which parts of our project need to be updated, and then what's that going to do to the scope, schedule, budget, and risk. So there's an analyzation piece that takes place, and then you make the request so that folks have all the information to make a decision. So, the 100% rules, like, it's always in play with your projects. The other part that, I didn't see this on the slides. Go back to the tools. And so, although we have, in the WBS, we can create in terms of the scope baseline, we can have a WBS and a WBS dictionary. One of the other things that we can have on our project, and the exam will call this out, is a product backlog. PMI will talk about a product backlog as an alternative to creating a WBS. And a backlog, for those of you that haven't used it, just think of, you likely have used it. Think of this. How many of you keep like some Excel spreadsheet or a list of all the tasks that need to be done on the project and all the deliverables? Okay. That is a backlog. That's your backlog. Now, you just don't call it a backlog. I mean, I don't know, what do you call it? Like, this is our list of activities. We all give it some term or name or flavor or whatever is important, but that is a backlog in essence. So, in software development, or in I shouldn't say software development, in agile development practices, they won't use a WBS because things change. They'll just use a product backlog. And that's what Michael was referring to, is what he's seeing in Jira, or what they're using there. All right, so that's your WBS dictionary. It'll have all this information. You may update some documents. We talked about inputs. Here's what it looks like. All right, we have different approaches to doing this. 100% rule, and now let's get into the case study.